The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. It's brought to you with Levi Solicitors. 10% off your legal fees. levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. Dan, Michael and Moscow to bring you this part 3 of the show. Heroes and villains. First, the Ken Bates Villain of the Week award nominations, please.
Lee Carsley.
We mentioned him earlier on in the show.
We did. He's the England under-21 manager, and he's incompetent, basically, because he's not seen fit to put Cresswell or Gelhardt in his team. And have they won? Did they win that game? No, they did not.
What happened? Who did they play?
They've drawn, haven't they, against Slovenia? Oh, they did beat Andorra 1-0.
Oh, well done.
Brilliant. Well done, lads.
Joffrey would have got 4 goals in that.
The ridiculous amount of investment that goes into youth football in England and all the mega academies of Chelsea and Man City and Arsenal, and the best they can churn out is a 1-0 win against Andorra. Barely worth bothering.
Speaking of people pumping money in, go on then, let's do Newcastle. We've got to nominate him here, haven't we? Because they've put themselves up there to be one of the villainous clubs.
Great bunch of lads, I think.
Well, yeah, if you don't say that, then apparently bad things will happen. You have to say that their new owners are the best bunch of lads in the world. Yeah, Newcastle have been a right old mess this week, trying to walk that line between are we with the richest club in the world? And you say, well, is that really a good thing given where the money's coming from? You're obsessed with us. Leave us alone. And you can't have it both ways. You can either puff your chests out and dance around in cheesecloths and robes because that's the sober, mature, responsible response to the takeover. But you can't then do that and say, you know, people shouldn't be paying any attention to what's happening at Newcastle, because you're drawing attention to what's happening at Newcastle, and what's happening at Newcastle, even if it may be just a continuation of lots of other bad things that have happened in the Premier League, in football, in society, doesn't mean that this is we don't put this into the good side of the ledger just because, all the other ones are bad, so we'll just say you're fine.
What aboutery, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the differences are very easy to draw out because they keep bringing up, you know, nobody worries about Saudi Arabian investment in Uber. That's true. I mean, people do worry about it to an extent that it is discussed and highlighted, but nobody, 50,000 people don't turn out on a weekend to cheer the taxi drivers on and put posters of them on the wall, and you don't spend £70 to buy an Uber shirt and put it on and go to another town and sing songs about how great Uber are. Whereas football clubs, they do exist in a different way culturally and in society. That means the rules do change because that is what you do. And now it's a two-way representation of whether a Newcastle fan is representing what happens in Saudi Arabia, as a lot of them seem to very cheerfully do, and whether Saudi Arabia is using Newcastle's reputation to wash away its human rights record.
There is a very clear
distinction
as well that Saudi Arabia have invested in Uber to make money. That's probably not their first priority with Newcastle, isn't that they're going to... I mean, obviously, if they make them successful, the value of their asset will increase. But they're probably, if the Newcastle fans' dreams are to be realised, just going to spunk a load of money on this thing with it never coming back. And that is not the same as them buying a bit of Disney or whatever, because they're not happy to just go, well, I'll tell you what, just make some films, lads. It doesn't matter if you don't make any profit off these. They want money back. On Newcastle, probably not.
And the other side of that is the way you receive it and the way you interact with it, because it is very difficult to go through modern life without being hypocritical. Because, I disagree with human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia, but I will get an Uber home. But it's very transactional. It's one of the I'm merely getting from A to B, and that is one of the few ways that society makes available for me to do that. I'm not chasing after the taxi, singing songs about it, and making it a part of my culture and life that is integral to my identity, the way that a football club is. And if Newcastle fans, the ones who are vociferous about this, if they want to insist on this comparison with investments in the likes of Uber and Disney, then they need to start regarding their football club the way that I regard Uber or Disney, and just make it purely transactional. And I think that's actually good advice for them. This is the way to negotiate a Newcastle fan through this, is never have the words support the team and not the regime been more applicable than in this situation. Modern society, and football in particular, does make it very difficult not to be hypocritical, but you can bend that hypocrisy in a way that doesn't involve singing the praises and becoming a fan of a despotic regime. You can still be a fan of Newcastle United and maybe start donating to Amnesty International to campaign for changes in the human rights record of Saudi Arabia. You're still a hypocrite because you are still with, you're going to a game and enjoying watching Neymar and Mbappe, who are obviously signed for Newcastle, on Saturday, and then you're doing a little bit of sports washing of your own self, going, chuck a tenner behind Amnesty International on Sunday. But if you're going to be a hypocrite, at least be a hypocrite that at least puts a little bit of a shoulder to a wheel that might turn something in a better direction.
But I think you've been hopelessly optimistic there, because your average football fan, and I understand if this had happened to us, we'd have exactly the same reaction, not us personally, but as a collective within the fan base. Some people will be saying, I don't give a shit, we're now billionaires. So there's that. And I just don't think it enters the consciousness. It's like, right, well, this is my football club. I mean, as my neighbour 2 doors down is a Newcastle fan. And I said to him, what do you think about it? He's like, well, you can't, choose who owns your football club, can you? And I said, well, actually, you know what? That is a fair point. But as you said, Moscow, I do agree with the sense that you can choose how you react to it.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that kind of stuck with me was the United with Pride tweet, their response to it, which is they describe themselves as the official Newcastle United LGBT plus inclusive supporters group. So they've got very close links to the club there. There was some real, what's the right word to describe it, manoeuvring to position themselves on, because they're dancing on the head of a pin there. You can't escape, the persecution of gay people and, minorities and stuff like that in Saudi Arabia. It's unavoidable, isn't it? So they're like square front and center with that issue. And yet they're saying, well, because they've dealt with a woman, that's a good thing, isn't it?
They're coming round to it. They'll be fine with everything within a few weeks.
As long as they're not chucking the gays off our roof, then it's fine, isn't it?
There is that perception that what happens in the Middle East stays in the Middle East, and that just because the regime runs itself in a particular way in Saudi Arabia doesn't affect anything over here, so we can ignore it. But I don't think that's true, particularly not when it comes to LGBTQ rights, because if you think about the Premier League, where there are no openly gay footballers, when statistically there should be, if English football is a reflection of English society, then expected gays would be quite high.
The new XG.
And the actual gays in football is absolute zero. And what Marching Out Together at Leeds, one of their missions is to help support the conditions within football that fans can feel comfortable as gay people going to games, and that a footballer might feel comfortable enough to make the decision that actually I'm going to be open about my sexuality. Nobody needs to be forced into it, because it's only as relevant as somebody wants to make it to be, but it is relevant that nobody yet has felt comfortable enough to do it. So that tells you that something's not quite right about football as a whole. But where it won't happen now is Newcastle, and probably not Manchester City previously, or Paris Saint-Germain, given their ownership's regime's record on LGBTQ rights. Because if you think about the amount of shit that the first player who comes out is going to get and the amount of support that they will need that, first of all, from their football club from top to bottom. And I would hope that if it was to be the case at Leeds United, that a player at Leeds could phone up Andrea Radrizzani and say, I'm going to make my sexuality public and I need support from everybody at the club to make sure that this doesn't go wrong. You can't really phone up Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
His Excellency, which he doesn't need to be called that, by the way. That's just something he's decided.
Yeah.
And then the Newcastle fans grovelled straight to it, because the trust put out the statement, and Jamie was thanked on it as well, which was nice.
But you're not going to be phoning him up and say, listen, I know that in your country I would be jailed and or chemically castrated. If not, I know the death penalty is there as a statute, but you don't really use it. But it's okay if I come out, especially when this is so much about prestige and bragging rights. Basically, the idea of owning Newcastle is to make them into something that they can boast about when Qatar are boasting about how Paris Saint-Germain haven't won anything, didn't win a fucking thing last season, and Abu Dhabi are boasting about Manchester City, who also can't win the goddamn Champions League. Everybody seems to assume that as soon as you have a rich Middle Eastern owner, Champions League will follow, but Paris Saint-Germain, they can't even win the French league, so it's not that good. But it's all about being able to put those players' images for the greater glory of Saudi Arabia. And if you imagine a player signs for Newcastle, scores 30 goals a season, they do win the Champions League, and he is the absolute emblem of everything that is great about Saudi Arabia. And he turns around and said, actually, lads, I'm gay. That's a huge problem then in terms of the reputation of Saudi Arabia on the world stage. So that's an impact that their ownership and the ownerships of Manchester City have in this country now, because I don't think a gay footballer, I can't speak for them, but I don't imagine you're going to go, well, is Newcastle really going to be the place where I want to be playing football for when I know that the ownership presides over a regime where I'm actually illegal? I don't think that's going to go. So you're immediately just making a change in this country. The argument about keeping politics out of football, if that even is a political question, falls down as long as you allow sovereign nation states and their wealth funds to buy.
But they've promised they're not.
Clubs.
The Premier League said they've promised they're not. They're not prepared to show anybody what those promises took the form of, but they promise. And I believe them because they're a great bunch of lads.
Yeah. If your owner is a crown prince, I think it's very difficult for you to say, but we don't want any politics in football. And to be fair, that's not in the control of Newcastle fans. It should be something the Premier League needs to get a grip of, who owns football clubs and for what reasons, and look at the, with this situation is much better controlled in Germany with the 50+1 rule, where you can at least keep ownerships within and power within the hands of the fans and minimise the impact that people can have. And because football clubs are a special case, I know the Newcastle fans keep banging on about Twitter and Uber and Disney, but it's very easy to say that there is a different community and cultural circumstances regarding football clubs, which is why they have owners and directors tests, and they have rules about who can own the football club that are not identical to rules about who can invest in businesses. It is different. The rules are different. The rules just aren't preventing this situation where, bless the Newcastle fans who are do actually have a right head about this, who all they want is Mike Ashley gone, and what they landed with is all this shit that really is nothing to do with them, that they don't want any part of. And yet you are asking Newcastle fans awkward questions. Well, your neighbour 2 doors down is suddenly being, well, what do you think about what's going on in Saudi Arabia? They don't think anything. They just want better players. But it's trying to explain to people that that's the moment to pause is at that point where he's like, well, actually, yeah, I think I'm a big fan of Newcastle United. I want us to have loads of good players, but what's happening in Saudi Arabia is terrible, and I think it could change. And it won't have a negative impact on their football club to say that, because when some Newcastle fans say, well, anything that we say isn't going to have any impact on the regime in Saudi Arabia anyway, okay, so why do you start the supporters discussion with, Your Excellency, please give us a great football club? Because if they're not going to listen to you about human rights, then they're not going to listen to you about how to run the football club. And how they're going to run the football club is essentially a given. It's not like, Terry from Gosford starts crying in the street like, oh, please buy us Nima. Oh, yeah, let's sign some good players. We weren't going to do that until these fans started begging us. You don't have to beg now if you're a Newcastle fan for them to give you a really good football club, because the only reason they're there is to have a really good football club that makes them look good. They don't actually give a shit about whether you want a good football club or not. So you begging and asking for it and losing all your dignity and your humanity, asking for it.
But people at Moscow, what will happen is people will respond to this and say,
jealous.
You're jealous. And I examined that question with myself when this all started pushing through, and I couldn't quite get to the bottom of what my feelings are. And am I jealous? And I realised I kind of landed on a position of, I'm not, because I don't want to have to deal with that moral conundrum.
I think that's where I'm at with it as well.
I don't feel anything about it. I'm just like, okay, well, because essentially this is another act in the pissing contest between the nation states of Qatar and Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia, and all the TV rights concerning being. It's a pissing contest, and it's irrelevant to me as a football fan who lives close to Leeds United. I just want to concentrate on us be okay.
I feel like we've had difficult decisions to make around whether to support or not support owners in the past with Bates. I mean, GFH were in here for such a brief period; they barely seemed to register. But with Bates and Chilino, it almost felt like it was okay to still go and not boycott because it was shit. If that makes sense. If we'd have had bad owners who were going to make us really good, it becomes a tougher moral choice, I think, almost, because we could still come in here and just slag Bates off week in, week out, and do the same with Chilino, and we could mock the ridiculousness of the situation. Whereas if you're really good, I don't know, it feels like you almost lose your moral high ground. We were doing it, we were supporting the team then in spite of terrible owners. If you're supporting terrible people who are actually, from a football point of view, excellent owners because they're investing a load of money and making you dead good, it does become more difficult. And I think where Newcastle fans seem to be slightly blinded by this is that they seem to think that they're being really picked on now.
It's not about them.
And it's just
not really
also,
about them.
it's also, and it reminded me a little bit of the way that when we had Chilino and Bates, you got a portion of Leeds fans who were kind of making out that we were being picked on, like, oh, David Conn's not writing about anything else. It's like, no, he is. You're just not reading it. If you've not read any of the stuff that's been put out there about Man City.
Amnesty International haven't done a bloody thing for years, and then this happened.
I know, it's like they seem to all of a sudden think the whole world has turned on them because it's Newcastle. It's like, no, this was there when it was Man City, when it was PSG. You just didn't listen to it, and it didn't affect you, so you weren't bothered. In much the same way as, what goes on in Saudi Arabia doesn't affect you, so you're not bothered.
And don't forget, we have our own, we had links to Qatar through the Aspire Academy, and that all seems to have gone quiet. We did have involvement with a grassroots company, and then there was the Myanmar trip as well, which in retrospect has looked even worse ever since, because the reports that have come out of the region there about the genocide that was going on have mounted up and made it look like an even worse idea to go. But you touched on something there about supporting the owners. You don't have to, even if they're good. Like Andrea Radrizzani's been very good for Leeds. I don't consider myself a fan of Andrea Radrizzani. I consider myself a fan of Leeds United, and I recognise he's done very good things for Leeds United. I think the Myanmar trip was stupid, so that's fine. But
then you can flip the argument on its head, Moscow, and they'll say exactly the same thing. Well, you don't have to support the owners. We're supporting our club.
But they're dancing around in the streets dressed up like them and going on Twitter defending them and doing all this whataboutery, where all I would ask of them is say, just support your team. Don't turn yourself into a fan of Saudi Arabia just because they've bought your football club. You can't control that. Mike Ashley could have sold to anybody, and Mike Ashley has decided to sell to them. It's not the Newcastle fans who decided, but the way that they've rolled over and allowed their tummies to be tickled, and it's what I was saying before about none of this is necessary, because I don't think the new owners are going to give two shits about what the fans want from their football club, because they have their plan, which is to make it into something that will rival Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain in terms of global prestige. And it doesn't matter what the fans say one way or the other. So what does any Newcastle fan gain from going around Twitter saying, yeah, but you weren't talking about Saudi Arabia 6 months ago? Yeah, because you weren't fucking dancing around Newcastle about Saudi Arabia 6 months ago. And that's what I'm trying to get you to stop doing. And
football clubs are special cases here. That's the thing. If the Saudi money disappears one day, Newcastle United won't disappear, because the fans will step up, and fair enough, they might have to start again in League One or whatever, but they will keep going. If all the Saudi money fell out of Uber and they own that entirely, the people aren't going to step in and save Uber because they love it in the same way as they do a football club. It's a completely different thing, and if you can't see that it is different, then
they don't care. Of course, they see it, but they don't care.
And if you're involved in currently trying to excuse it and excuse the whole investment strategy around other businesses and Newcastle United and comparing the two, you are sort of doing your own little bit of sports washing for them. You're at the lowest level possible.
You're exactly what they want, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. They want people defending it and going, oh well, it's fine, isn't it? Really, or at the very least, distracting from from the main issues of it by going, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? And football ownership is fucked. Like there's no doubt about it. Look at how we've had it. We've had some abysmal owners, but then at the other end of it, we had an owner who was going to be barred for not paying VAT on a car.
Cellino has spoken up this week. He said, they asked me all these questions, and then these guys, they just let him in.
And
he's got a point.
And he does have a point, because not paying VAT on a Range Rover, it's not that bad, really. I didn't want him owning our club, but
it turned out to be a bigger barrier than murdering a journalist.
Exactly.
So, but the other thing and I know we don't need to go on about it too much, but the last point I would make on it is the childishness of this whole assumption that billions equals success. And that's why I mentioned before.
Well, I've got a final question from that. What happens when they're all billionaires? What happens when everybody in the Premier League is owned by a billionaire? Then what?
You don't need money to be successful. You need to be competent. And you can see it. That's why I mentioned PSG didn't even win the French league last year. Their whole target was to win the Champions League. They've not done it. Manchester City, they've got the greatest coach you can imagine. Look at that squad. Can't win the Champions League. Roman Abramovich lasts his tits off every year, basically because he got in first, so got such a lead. In Chelsea, how can you start a season with Frank Lampard in charge and still win the Champions League? But
by getting rid of Frank Lampard is the easy answer to that.
But the basic problem that people can't let go of this idea that money will instantly equal better players equal success. Competence is so important alongside it, and once you've bought the football club, the money is needed to get rid of Mike Ashley. That's why they needed 300 million quid. The decisions that the new owners will make from now on don't need money. They need intelligence. We need a new sporting director. So they're looking for the best sporting director in Europe. That doesn't need a fucking $1 billion to make that decision. And then you don't need $1 billion petrodollar to pay them, because sporting directors don't command the kind of wages that footballers do. You could probably pay for the best sporting director in the world with the bar takings in the ground every year. It doesn't need the millions. And competent chief executive, and then you're getting the right manager. And these are decisions that are based on intelligence and competence that don't necessarily come with money. And we had this discussion when there was the big discussion about whether Leeds should be taken over by Qatar Sports Investment or the 49ers. And we've thrown a lot in with the 49ers. And you'll still have a lot of Leeds fans say, well, Roderick Tarney's potless 49ers never put any money in. Wish we had QSI, because what they've done at Paris Saint-Germain, that actually they've not won anything at PSG that PSG wouldn't have won without them. I don't think they've made a significant impact. They've got Air Jordan on the shirts instead of a Nike logo, so that's nice. There's a material.
They're a lifestyle brand now.
The material difference, yeah. But the success comes from having people in place who know. Well, Qatar doesn't have a strong track record in football. They're not a historic nation with loads of football knowledge that we need to tap into, that they're going to bring something. Same with Saudi Arabia. Whereas at least with the 49ers, what they've brought in to us is knowledge of running a sporting organisation. That's all those people have ever done. And it's where their experience lies. And the stadium project, they've rebuilt a stadium. We're planning to rebuild Elland Road. So it actually makes more sense. Instead of you going with the richest people, you go with the people who have experience of building a stadium in recent years. So there's a fitting together of intelligence and knowledge.
But the counter argument to that is that we, on the football side, are doing pretty well. We're overachieving because we've got one of the world's best coaches, but the infrastructure side is desperately in need. Whereas Newcastle, you could say the opposite.
And
so they're going to concentrate on the football side.
Well, their infrastructure's fucked though. Have you seen their training ground? It's a joke.
That's true.
Yeah, they were in a paddling pool, weren't they, instead of ice baths and stuff.
Yeah, I think but that kind of stuff, I was just going to say on the infrastructure stuff, you can get a loan for it anyway, as long as you've got a decent amount of cash. You can get financing for this sort of thing from anywhere, and you could even get it from a Saudi Arabian wealth fund through the back door. There are options available. What it comes down to is who's going to be in the building spending the money, and are they going to be any good or not? And I think we are just as well placed with the knowledge that the 49ers can bring and apply than having Saudi Arabia coming in, who they don't have the track record in football or sport.
The thing with having billions of pounds, though, is it allows you to make loads of mistakes and it not matter. Like Newcastle could go out in January and spend £300 million on some absolutely shit players who all fail.
There is going to be a £20 million Newcastle tax on everything now, isn't there?
And then they can do it again in the summer. If they don't work, they can just sell whoever they want. If they buy James Tarkowski for £40 million from Burnley and he's shit, they can just sell him for 15 in the summer and go, oh well, we've lost that money, but
they do have
we got loads more. It's all just piled up over it.
They do have a lot of headroom on profit and sustainability, but that won't last forever if they spend that way. And although those FFP is regarded as like a paper tiger, the rules keep changing and the concentration is very much from UEFA and the Premier League on controlling spending and stopping what's happened at Barcelona and Real Madrid from becoming the norm. And, if you look at Barcelona, their wage bill is set by the league. There are controls in place to stop clubs from doing that. And that's why brings us full circle to kind of the stupidity of kowtowing to whoever your football club owner is. Ultimately, the way that FFP works is it ensures that the money that is being spent on players comes from fans, because it all has to come from revenue. You can only put in so much of the owner's money anyway to cover losses. The way that you make money is by building the infrastructure, so you have a bigger stadium and you have bigger sponsorships. And the money
you have your own sponsorship though in a lot of the cases. Yeah, so you have companies within your
don't
group.
Pretend that's not like Manchester City are dragging through the courts trying to avoid being done for the level of sponsorship they come. And you can't. There are rules in place, and if they keep tightening them down,
but they won't. The point is that the tail's wagging the dog. Ultimately, the tail will continue to wag the dog, and they will always find ways to do it. Always.
And Man City and Chelsea and PSG have not faced any.
None.
Have not faced any actual punishment, have they yet?
No.
Because they keep fighting it in the courts. They have been dragged through. So it's not like there hasn't been an intention. And that's why the rules keep going in that direction. And even then, you have to make it plausible. So you can't just do £1 billion sponsorship. It has to be within the realms of sanity and worth. Otherwise, you will be punished because it will be so goddamn obvious. But the point is, the bulk of the money in the end will come through ticket sales, TV subscriptions, and the ability to sell advertising to show to football supporters. So it all comes out of the fans' pockets in the end. So the billions that back the new Saudi owners of Newcastle are less relevant than the millions that will be coming out of the pockets of Newcastle fans to buy these players in the end anyway.
Bless you. I admire your idealism, but I'm far more cynical about the way the world works.
I think Newcastle will probably go from being quite unsuccessful with mainly bad players to be quite successful with loads of good players.
Yeah.
And that'll be down entirely to the fact that they've got a lot of Saudi money has arrived.
Yeah, but they have that because of the way that Mike Ashley's run them in recent years. He's not spent anything.
They're a long way behind, aren't they?
So they have a long way. Well, because it means they've got a lot of room under FFP. They have more space to pay. But why haven't Everton been spending any of their billionaire owners' money in the last few transfer windows? Is because they spunked it all on James Rodriguez and they can't go over the FFP limit. It is having an impact on football clubs now. Why did Barcelona have to give Messi to Paris Saint-Germain? Is because the league would not let them change their wage structure to keep him. So there are effects and impacts that are happening, and
well, let's just say this. Let's say this. In 5 years' time, let's see where we are. That's about what we're saying.
And you asked the question before about what will we do when every owner is a billionaire. Is it going to get to that point, or will there be?
That's when it comes down to competence.
Or will there be a tipping point where it won't be allowed to get to that point, and the balance will be redressed and will be walked back, and they'll start listening to Bielsa's point. Will start going through where he says everybody in football has to start earning less. But the rampant, 2 World Cups in 4 years, a World Cup every 2 years that FIFA are trying to bring in. The resistance that's going up to that is part and parcel of the resistance to the European Super League. And there's less of an appetite at the moment, I think, of letting clubs just have their own way at all times. How far that can go, whether it can bring in rules, whether we can get some kind of government leadership in this country that says 50+1 rule. They were supposed to be exploring that to see if we can bring in a version of it in this country. Whether those things will ever come to anything,
it would jar against the general vibe of the way business is being treated in this country, it must be said.
Tell you what, lads.
To prevent outward investment.
Lee Carsley's earned that Ken Bates Film of the Week award, hasn't he? Christ. Right, let's move on to the Gaetano Berardi Hero of the Week award then. We'll rattle through this quickly because we went long on that. Nominations. We've got to give a nomination to Thomas Christiansen, who beat the USA for Panama's coach.
It's worth watching his post-match press conference on YouTube to hear Thomas Christiansen speaking Spanish. Which he will. I mean, I think his mum is the Spanish one, isn't he?
He played for Spain, didn't he?
He played for Spain and is played for Barcelona and grew up in. I think he moved to Spain when he was a teenager.
9.
Yeah,
that's just a number I've plucked out of the air.
Something like that. But obviously, we heard him speaking English when he was manager of Leeds, and it's quite refreshing and fun to hear him speaking. I assume it's Spanish. It sounded Spanish.
Panamanian.
Yes.
Canalese.
But
I've always been fascinated by the Panama Canal, by the way. I don't know why.
A man.
It's got a definite Wikipedia wormhole about it as the Panama Canal. You'll start reading about it then before you know it, you're on YouTube
just
watching.
Chopped a continent in half.
It was a good idea, wasn't it? It was a long way around.
Yeah, it was.
But he showed
Panama
he showed the USA who's boss because they rotated their team to keep some of their good players back, and Thomas went and beat him.
Luke Ayling did some good stuff as well. Charlie Mawson, who was out at the weekend, there was a proposal and a wedding and an anniversary and some children involved, and there was all happiness and joy and a meal and champagne. And Luke Ayling sent over a bottle, didn't he, and paid their bill, which is awesome.
So the moral of the story is, if you're ever in somewhere and you see Luke Ayling, kick up a bit of a fuss, say hello to him,
well, it's like
and then kind of go.
Well, do you not do
Table 12, remember, Luke, on your way out?
Do you know, you're a man who's a bit of a spendthrift, Michael. Do you not ever do the birthday or anniversary trick? Like, if you ever, I mean, I know you won't go out for food because you won't pay other people to do it. You'll just get an Aldi special, won't you? But if you're ever going out or you're staying in a hotel, you always just give them a little email and say, listen, it's so-and-so's birthday. I just wonder if there's anything special you can do. So you get the little upgrade.
There's very little they can do at a travel lodge, I've found. There's very...
You get an extra, you get 2 pillows.
Something out of the vending machine, maybe.
Wow. Your wife, she's one lucky woman.
Certainly is.
So nice work, Luke Ayling.
But that is, I mean, it's nice that he's doing these things, isn't it?
Giving back to the people, isn't he? Ben White gets a nomination as well because he was asked it was by Arsenal as well, wasn't it? Which is wonderful. What's your favourite stadium? So he's there at the old Emirates Megadome or whatever. It's Leeds United, isn't it? When it's full.
I'd say probably a full Leeds stadium, which he doesn't seem to know the name of the stadium, which is a bit of a shame. But the Leeds Stadium, obviously I played there 2 years ago. That was probably my first experience of a full stadium in a lively crowd, and last, etc., etc.
Is this, I know I don't want to drag us back to the Newcastle takeover discussion, but from what we've heard from Arsenal fans previously, is that the biggest war crime in football, what Ben White has said there?
Well, I'm sure
he a terrorist, guy?
I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion about it.
We do need to check the old Arsenal fans TV to see how the Ben White traitor talk is going down.
Crescencio Somerville scored that amazing goal for the 23s against Sunderland. They had quite a threadbare squad out because of all the internationals, didn't they? But just sort of picked it up and did it all himself.
Some genuine children in that game. There's some 16-year-olds playing, weren't there? Which is quite impressive.
Archibald Gray came on again. Old wacko Mark Jacko wasn't happy about was losing that one. We lost 2-1 in the Premier League Cup in the end. I thought we were all right, actually.
I thought we'd be knocked out, but we're not, are we?
No, it's a big old group stage. So we play Mansfield next.
In the Premier League Cup?
Yeah, and then we have the return fixtures with Sunderland and Mansfield and the other team that we've played in the Cup, who I can't remember. But yeah, it's a 4-team group, so 6 games home and away. Old Stuart McKinstry was good in the second half of this as well. Very different winger to Somerville, that he's not taken on the whole team, but was get the ball on the right wing, do a step over and cross it, and his corners were great. It's just a shame, the finishing was off. Max Dean was also quite entertaining. He's a very angry young man.
Raphinha's getting the hero of the week, isn't he? Because he's the best player in the world now.
He is. He's football's brightest hope. If you want to go to the blog and find out, we mentioned Rob Conlon's article about him in the earlier on. I wrote about him after the Colombia game and tied it to Diego Simeone was talking to Vincent del Bosque in El Pai newspaper in Spain and lamenting the loss of the art of dribbling. I said, who dribbles anymore? Nobody dribbles. Who has that talent? Who has the individual ability? And it reminded me of Bielsa saying pretty much the same thing after Maradona died. He says, if Mbappe is the best player in the world, he doesn't have any of those joyful skills that we saw with Maradona or Messi. And much as I'm, wondering if the weather's ever going to change about football ownership, I was wondering if coaches are going to start to be less about rigid, because that was what Simeone was saying. He said, we're all about tactics, we're all about, I have my numerical superiority and whatever. But he said Bielsa always used to say that what makes Bielsa happier than anything, even after he's trained everybody in what Scotty Parker said were his scripted movements, which he does to an extent, is that when a player goes on the pitch and does something that he's decided for himself, and whether we're going to start seeing a little bit more of that kind of stuff, in which case, Raphinha, £200 million, please, Newcastle. And that's just to start talking about him.
And Liam Cooper now to start dribbling out from the back and taking people on.
Well, we've got Llorente, haven't we? So
yeah, that's true.
You can teach Cooper how to do it.
But it's been an amazing week for him, and he does bring us joy. I know there's that lingering fear about when he will leave, and
also that Uruguay are going to snap him on Friday night.
Yeah, there is that.
If he tries some of that stuff
before he gets the slow boat back to Southampton. Anyway, so Raphinha is our hero of the week. Congratulations. That wraps it up for this one. Then we will return with another weekly show next week. Then will we? If his leg's that badly shattered, you'd need to put him on a stable surface. You might not be able to fly. The boat might be the answer. Yeah, we've got the match ball, which is coming up straight after Southampton and propaganda and all that. And we will catch you next time.
The Square Ball Podcast.